2004 was a solid season for Andy Houston. He didn't win any races, but he still had a very solid finish in points and had some good runs in the top 5 and top 10 and competed for wins but never got one. But in 2005, he needs to win as it is a contract year and he doesn't have much sponsorship heading into 2006, so he needs to ramp it up. Now before we get into 2005, there is a couple more drivers retiring or leaving their teams at the end of 2005. The two big retirements this year are going to be Mark Martin and Rusty Wallace. They are both retiring. And yes, Mark Martin will actually retire. He's not going to come back and stick around for 8 more years like he did in real life. He is legitimately retiring. Rusty Wallace is also retiring. And another big name that is actually leaving their ride is Sterling Marlin. He is leaving Chip Ganassi in that 40 team to go pursue other opportunities in racing. So in the Budweiser Shootout, Jeff Gordon wins. Next week at Daytona, rookie, first race ever, Carl Edwards wins the Daytona 500. And then even crazier, in an insane fuel mileage finish that no one would have predicted, Stanton Barrett wins at California on fumes. Everyone was running out, and I guess Stanton Barrett was slow enough to keep going, and he rolled his car across the line. Then at Las Vegas, Greg Biffle wins, so he kind of go back to normal there, and then he wins Atlanta, actually. He gets back-to-back wins. But then, Kyle Petty wins at Bristol. He gets revenge for what happened to him in 2003 when Robbie Gordon beat him. I think he actually raced Robbie Gordon for it, so it's just the reverse scenario. And then Jeff Gordon gets 2 wins at Martinsville in Texas. Then Stewart gets his first win of the season at Phoenix. Ricky Rudd wins in the Wood Brothers car at Talladega. And then Tony Stewart wins Darlington. And then finally, as we head to the All-Star weekend, Kurt Busch wins at Richmond for his first win on the season. Points after race 11 are Jeff Gordon is in the lead, 89 points ahead of Greg Biffle. Then Tony Stewart is second, Carl Edwards is third, Andy Houston, who has had 6 top 10s, is 5th in points. Then Elliott Sadler is 6th, Matt Kenseth 7th, Ryan Newman 8th, Ricky Rudd is 9th, and then Jamie McMurray, who had a really strong season last year, is 10th. Other notables, Stanton Barrett. Stanton Barrett is solidly 42nd in points, only making the first 2 races of the year. So now, as we head to the All-Star weekend, Bobby Labonte does the same exact thing he did last year, then wins the All-Star Open, and actually goes on to win the All-Star race. Next up in the 600, Jeff Gordon wins, getting his 3rd win on the season, and then he gets his 4th win at Dover. Tony Stewart wins at Pocono. Then Brian Vickers in another crazy fuel mileage race wins at Michigan in that Hendrick car. It's his first career win. Ricky Rudd wins Sonoma, getting his 2nd win on the season. Sterling Marlin wins Daytona. And then Greg Biffle, who hasn't won since Atlanta, race 4, wins at Chicagoland. Now at New Hampshire, it looks like it's going to be a race between Gordon, Stewart, and Greg Biffle. But then, in the closing laps, Andy Houston comes up and passes all of them, and he takes the win at New Hampshire. He gets his first win on the season and his first win in over 2 years. Jeff Gordon wins at Pocono. Greg Biffle gets his 4th win on the year at the Brickyard. Then Stewart wins Watkins Glen. Then Bobby Labonte wins Michigan. Kurt Busch wins the night race at Bristol. Then Greg Biffle wins California, and then backs it up with a win at the Richmond race. Your points after Richmond are Jeff Gordon is still leading with 5 wins by 228 points over Andy Houston, who's had only 1 less top 10 than him, and has 8 poles. Greg Biffle's 3rd, Tony Stewart's 4th with his 4 wins, then Carl Edwards, the rookie, 5th, Matt Kenseth is 6th, the first driver with 0 wins, Mark Barton's 7th, McMurray's 8th, Jimmy Johnson is 9th, still hasn't won yet as well, then Ryan Newman is 10th. Starting off the final 10 races, Bobby Labonte gets back-to-back wins at New Hampshire and Dover. Gets his 2nd and 3rd win on the season, like he did in 2003. Andy Houston wins at Talladega. He gets his 2nd win on the season. Jimmy Johnson wins at Kansas for his 1st win. This is where Tony Stewart really starts to close up the points gap as Stewart gets back-to-back wins at the Charlotte night race in Martinsville. However, Andy Houston is also closing the gap on Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon has started to fall apart here, as after Martinsville, Andy Houston's only 3 points behind. At Atlanta, Jeff Green wins Atlanta. That puts Andy Houston in the points lead over Jeff Gordon by 3 points, and Tony Stewart's closing with 119 back. Then at Texas, Tony Stewart wins again. He closes up the gap big time. He's now only 89 points behind Houston. Then at Phoenix, Tony Stewart wins once again, and that puts him 13 points behind Andy Houston. So Andy Houston is leading the points heading into the final race of the season at Homestead. Jimmy McMurray wins the race. Tony Stewart finishes second. Andy Houston finishes back of the top 10. And Tony Stewart becomes your 2005 Cup Series champion over Andy Houston by 11 points. Jeff Gordon was third, 82 points back, with Greg Biffle being 235 points back and fourth. Mark Martin fifth. Carl Edwards 6th, McMurray 7th, Bobby Labonte 8th, Kurt Busch 9th, and Ryan Newman 10th. Rusty Wallace in his final season gets 0 wins, but has an 11th place finish in points. And Sterling Marlin, his final year in the 40 car, gets 15th in points, and with his 1 win at the Daytona night race. So Andy Houston performed really well in 2005. He got 2 wins and finished second in points. His contract is up at the end of this year, and he doesn't have sponsorship to keep him with the team like the 32 car does. So where's Andy Houston going to go? Since there's going to be an open ride at the 40 team, Andy Houston will fill that spot, and he will become the driver of the number 40 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. So Andy Houston looks to impress his new team and hopes to go out in 2006, be just as strong, maybe stronger, than he was in 2005.